Ronin is a 2D turn-based game that uses clever puzzles disguised as intense action sequences to emulate being a badass ninja character, out for blood and revenge. Ronin uses a simplistic level-based system where you go into modern buildings of varying shapes and sizes, sneaking and slaughtering your way towards the objective, these being a terminal or an assassination target. Between you and the objective stand a number of enemies, positioned carefully in such a way that invokes clever, and sometimes unorthodox, ways of approaching them. Ronin's story revolves around your assassination targets, slowly fed to you through tidbits of information about their malicious background and how they relate to the protagonist's past, the titular Ronin. The story is explained using quick snippets of text laid over a photo of her past self alongside all her targets, crossing them out one by one as you gradually approach the finale. It's a fairly simple story, admittingly, but it serves its purpose and doesn't take one's attention away from the focus of the game, the gameplay. Everything seems to match up with the gameplay beautifully here. The simple visual aesthetics give just enough information to keep everything mysterious, whilst also providing great clarity in heated combat scenarios. The music matches the tone of the action well. Without distracting the players, they concentrate on the next move. All these elements combine to present an abstract show of clean violence and acrobatics. All the game needs is proper gameplay mechanics to tie it all up together. So, is the gameplay any good? Long story short, it is, for the most part. Praise where praise is due, this is a unique game with fairly unique mechanics. I myself have only seen the gameplay elements here scattered around in a few other titles, but even then, none of them do quite like this. For the most part, the gameplay is exciting and keeps you on edge. The stealth requires careful planning and maneuvering, while the combat is intense and provides interesting decisions for the player. While sneaking around, you move your character with the keyboard and can link with the mouse, making speed as much of a factor as precision is. On top of that, you also gain access to a grappling hook, which you can use whilst midair, and you can pause time with the spacebar at any time to pull yourself to the location you connected to. Combat wears completely different, however, as you switch to a turn-based system the second you are spotted. You no longer move with the keyboard here, and instead work on a second-by-second basis, where you can select your next action and see it play out. You can still leap and grapple around, but now you can also slash at nearby enemies, or leap onto them to stun them for a few turns. What really makes the fighting exciting, however, is the combo mechanic, which awards points for successfully stunning or killing an enemy, allowing for more diverse abilities to be used, such as the ability to throw your sword or dash to an enemy stunning them. I love this concept, as the abilities do genuinely feel cool to use and combo together. They are sufficiently rewarding and work great, making you feel like a badass, dashing from one enemy to the other, dodging their shots, finishing off distant enemies with a blade throw, amongst other possibilities. You even get an extra turn if you reach 5 points, which adds to the variety of options. There are, however, some glaring issues here, namely the controls. They feel wonky at times and are awfully inconsistent, sometimes by design or sometimes by accident. Switching on a whim from free-flowing movement to turn-based combat and then back to free-flowing can be confusing at times, especially when it happens whilst the scenario is still underway because the enemy's lost sight of you for a second. But the worst offenders are a time where you feel as if the game lied to you. The arrow that's meant to indicate your jump trajectory will sometimes give the wrong information to you as you get stuck on a platform you thought you were going to jump off of. This leaves you feeling cheated and leads to frustration, especially in a game that's quite difficult like this one. You die in one hit, which is fine for the most part, but feels terrible when you don't move out of the way because you got stuck somewhere trying to jump away, or end up somewhere other than when you thought you would go. You retry hard scenarios a lot in this game, which leads me to my next big issue. The enemy behavior is very random. Playing a scenario out in the same way won't always work because the enemies won't react the same way every time, which really takes away from the careful planning which I thought I'd get going in. In all honesty though, combat does work as you would expect in most cases, acting out as a glorious ballet of chaos and violence as you dance around the enemy fire, executing enemies at a single slash or kick eventually. Ronin also has its own progression system in the form of skill points. These skill points are acquired by completing an extra triad of objectives on each stage and are used to unlock your most exciting abilities. This system is a bit annoying, however, as you get just enough levels to max out your skill tree before the final level, so missing even a single mission means you will miss out on something in that playthrough. This would be fine if the missions were such a pain on some levels. These missions, specifically the don't trigger the alarm one, are exceedingly frustrating in certain parts of the game, where they really stop the flow if you want to get them. And you do want to get them, you don't want to miss out on those cool abilities I mentioned earlier. It felt less about skill at times and more about patience and how many times I could bother to retry. And with all that being said, you eventually get to the final level. Spoilers ahead for the finale here, if you really care about that stuff, even though there's not much of a story here, to be honest. You get no more extra objectives here, just the one. Kill the boss. You get a glimpse of the massive level layout as you move into position. Being able to leap into action with no burden of avoiding alarms here feels great, and a new mechanic exclusive to the final level gets introduced. You can take a hit in this level and not die, instead initiating a countdown which gets reset on each kill you get. This matches the intensity perfectly if you're fighting the enemies, emphasizing the character's rage and their determination to finish their mission. Even with this mechanic in place, however, fighting your way through this level is tough. It features the largest amount of enemies yet, with some traps lay about as well to hinder you even more. Problem is though, you don't really have to fight much to get through this level. As long as you can avoid enough gunfire to leap your way to the final boss, you don't really have to fight much save for the occasional guy to reset the timer if you got hit earlier. Doing this, the level is over fairly quickly and feels a little disappointing. Sure, if you manage to not get hit and escape, you get the happy ending, but all this really is a slightly different photograph displayed under the credits. No real incentive here to do it except for the Steam achievement. And even if you do get the sad ending, it's just a torn photograph. And that's all the ending really is, a photo with credits over it. It's pretty disappointing, but again, I don't think anyone's playing this for the story, honestly. Finally, after all that, at least you unlock New Game Plus mode, which makes enemy behavior pose a bigger challenge, as well as straight up increasing the amount of them present throughout the level. There's no real incentive to do this, however, apart from another Steam achievement, as you don't get any other story elements added, or gameplay elements for that matter. Which leads me to my final problem. There's no compelling reason to replay this game, and there's very little content here to begin with. You can blaze through it pretty quickly if you ignore the skill points, but it was made by a very small team to be fair, and they aren't charging too much for it either. Still, I would have loved to see some features added, such as a form of time tracking to promote efficiency, or a replay system so they can see the combat play out in real time. With all that said, however, the game is still great, and for all its flaws, I really enjoyed it, and will still recommend it.